right, welcome to Good Take. Wes Goldberg here with Mike Shearer, the author of Basketball Poetry. We've got some good takes cooking up, including a few about when is the best time to trade a star player. But before we get to all of that, just a reminder, Good Take is part of the newly launched RealGM Radio Network. We have done this segment before, and now it is a standard staple here. Every Thursday is going to be an episode of Good Take between me and Mike. Remember to subscribe. Make sure that you check out all the other great shows by subscribing to RealGM Radio wherever you get your podcasts. Also, make sure that you check out the YouTube channel so that you can watch the full episodes. Double Dribble with Mo Dakhil and Jared Dubin going up Mondays and Wednesdays as well. So there's a lot of great content coming your way over at the RealGM Radio feed. We're going to open the show with a conversation about a couple of games last night. Cavs versus Hawks. We'll start there, Mike. Also, we're going to talk about Cade Cunningham making his return to the Detroit Pistons. But before we get to that, I thought that Cavs-Hawks game was really interesting for a few different reasons, mostly because it felt like a playoff game, right? I thought both teams came out with something to prove. This could potentially be the first-round matchup, right, in the Eastern Conference, depending on how the standings fall. The Cavs get the win in this one. Donovan Mitchell just hitting tough shot after tough shot. You got Dean Wade coming back after an extended absence. It looks like this is going to be the starting lineup that they prefer, that Kenny Atkinson prefers to go with Dean Wade there, and that's as that fifth starter for Cleveland. Where do you want to start with this one?
Yeah, I think what was interesting was not only did it feel like a playoff game, but the Cavaliers treated it like a playoff game. And there was some chatter ahead of time, right? Like, would they want to, sit some guys, potentially lose to guarantee that they're the 4 seed, avoid Boston in the second round? Because a lot of people think Cleveland will match up better with Detroit. I'm not so sure about that. But Kenny Atkinson company did not subscribe to that theory. They came out. They had a lot of interesting kind of tactical adjustments that you would associate more, I think, with like a playoff series. So you had James Harden guarding Onyeka Okongwu, they're Atlanta's ostensible center. They did a great job ignoring Dyson Daniels and Jonathan Kuminga on the three-point line. They moved Dean Wade all around to guard both Nikhil Alexander-Walker and Jalen Johnson a little bit and CJ McCollum a lot. And I just thought it was interesting that they were kind of pulling out a lot of the stops for a team that they're going to play again tomorrow and then very likely again in the playoffs now with that win.
Yeah, so people might be hearing a little bit of a buzzing in the background of this episode because there's construction happening a few floors up. So that's what that is, if you're wondering. But they did approach this as a playoff game for all the reasons that you're saying. Also, the minutes. I mean, you just look at the way that these guys played. 36 minutes for Evan Mobley. You got more than almost 34 minutes for James Harden. Like, they really played their main guys in this one. And I think this was important. Cleveland's been playing well lately, and it feels like they're starting to figure things out. Specifically, the chemistry between Harden and Mobley stands out to me in these not just in last night's game. They I think they connected for maybe one play on a pick and roll, but really over this stretch, I thought that the Harden-Mobley chemistry was way off when Harden first got there, which is to be expected. It's fine, but it was almost turnkey between Harden and Jared Allen because Jared Allen's just more that traditional kind of pick and roll 5-man. Mobley's a little bit different in the way that he moves, in some of the things that he's trying to accomplish out there offensively. And it did take a little while for Harden and Mobley to get in sync, and I think they've really gotten in sync lately. And then this game from Mobley overall was sensational. This is not just the stat line. It's easy to look at 22 points, 19 rebounds. What do you have, 3 assists, 3 blocks? Yeah, I mean, awesome stat line for him. But it's the way that he went about it. Getting to the basket. Every time there was a small on him, he put him under the basket. There was almost like a magnet between Evan Mobley and the rim. And that's when he's really at his best, where he's not falling in love with the 3-ball. He's not falling in love with the face-up perimeter stuff. He really got to the rim a lot, especially in transition. I love that. And in a game like this, with like a playoff type of feel to it, that's what they're going to need, in the postseason from Mobley. Like, yeah, the 3-point shooting and all that kind of stuff where he's able to space the floor is nice every once in a while. But when he's playing like this, he becomes a real difference maker.
Yeah, this is a guy who I think is very much in line for a playoff glow up. Like, he's basically taken a ton of criticism despite being an all defensive caliber player again this year. And, he's going to get some all NBA votes. I don't know, like the offense has stagnated to some degree, but people, I think, sometimes mistake stagnation for decline or stagnation for just not being good. And so because this narrative around Mobley has been so negative all season long, people forget that he's a pretty friggin' good player. And he really looked like he wanted to make a statement against a team that he's going to be seeing a whole lot of in the next couple of weeks, most likely. Yeah, the physical edge was what really stood out to me, right? Like to your point, like he was just putting people under the basket. He was destroying the Hawks forwards and big men on the boards. And that's the kind of thing that I think he needs in his own head as a proof of concept going forward. So like, I think this is a guy who, if Cleveland comes out and they really do take care of business against Atlanta, who they're likely to play, if they then go into Detroit and kind of at least surprise me, they wouldn't surprise themselves. Like this is a guy who I think definitely have a chance to write some very interesting storylines about soon.
He's also the main guy guarding Jalen Johnson, who did not have a good game. Really made him uncomfortable, I thought, in this one quite a bit. The tracking data shows that Jalen Johnson didn't score at all when Evan Mobley was on him. Now, some of that tracking data is a little wonky, but overall, like you just watch that game, Jalen Johnson never really felt like he can get into a rhythm or can get comfortable. And if that's going to be the case, then that really does bode well for Cleveland in a potential series here.
Yeah, and Johnson, switching to the Atlanta side of things for a second, like Johnson has a little bit of a track record, I think, of kind of struggling against the best teams. And part of that is just coming with being like the focal point of the defensive game plan. And I think we saw that some tonight where Cleveland was pretty happy to let him shoot jumpers. Mobley did a great job, but it was also a team effort, right? Like they were playing way off of Dyson Daniels or Kuminga. And anytime Jalen Johnson was going into the paint, there was a crowd of guys there ready to meet him. And so it was very much a bespoke game plan to take away what he does best. And I think he's a good enough player, and even though he's not a dead-eye shooter, he's a good enough shooter that sometimes that plan isn't going to work, but it worked great last night. And I think we saw sort of down the stretch, it was Nickeil Alexander-Walker who was sort of leading the charge. Kuminga in the second half had a lot of buckets too, and Johnson was more in sort of an ancillary role. That'll have to change if the Hawks want to win a first-round series, I think. But yeah, I do want to talk about Nickeil Alexander-Walker, though, who was Atlanta's best player yesterday.
He's next on my notes. Yes, let's do it.
He's been one of my favorite watches all season. I love just this, like, he was my choice for most improved, which you can find over at Basketball Poetry. I think this is a guy who is just showing off brand new skills that we've never seen him string together before. Most notably, this disgusting spin move to left-hand finish that has become his sort of signature. Doris Burke had a nice note last night. I think that was, I believe she said that Alexander Walker is one of the only guys in the league who has 80 layups with both his left and his right hand. And when I think of Alexander Walker this season, it's all been these like insane lefty finishes. The prettiest one was actually when he just juked Jared Allen terribly, driving at him. Looked like he was going to put up a floater, switched it out, and did like this leaning, like looping lefty layup underneath Allen's arms. It was very impressive. But like this is a guy who, like he was being guarded by Mitchell most of the night. He's being guarded by Dean Wade some. And it didn't really matter who was in front of him. He just kind of had his way. And I think like his ascendance this season has been so awesome, and I think if he's going to score like this against the Cavs, like that could be a problem.
Yeah, you and I have talked about most improved in the past, about some other candidates. I'm fully there now, also with Nickeil Alexander-Walker. He's clearly he taken this award and ran with it. I'm so glad. I also have a different lefty layup in my notes that I wanted to shout out. Nice. The one that you said also was incredible. The one that made me just like I had to go back and watch it a few times was, first of all, Nickeil Alexander-Walker has this really interesting cadence to his game where he does have that quick burst, but he's kind of slow to get into it, like purposely. Like he'll kind of hang out on the perimeter for a little bit, kind of get you wrong-footed, and then he just sprints at the rim. And when he gets to that, when he kind of gets into that spin move and stuff like that, like he's kind of all angles and elbows, and there's kind of things going all over, and you're not really sure. Okay, when is he gonna really hit you with the layup? He's a little unpredictable. And he finished over both Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen on one of those lefty layups, high arcing, just like the ball, he goes up for that layup with that scoop layup with the left hand, and you think the ball is going to come out of his hand, and then it doesn't. He lets it hang there for like a half second more, and it comes off his fingertips at the highest point, and it goes way above the backboard and hits glass and then comes down. And I'm like, he did that against Mobley and Jarrett Allen? Like, this guy has zero fear of attacking the basket. For a guy that was a journeyman for the beginning of his career to be, and then sort of this nice signing that we all liked after, he leaves Minnesota, gets to Atlanta, and then it's like, okay, what's his role really going to be behind Trae Young and all these things? For him to just attack some of the premier rim protectors in the NBA with that kind of gumption is, I just love watching this guy play. He's been sensational. He's been this is not just a, hey, opportunity has found this guy. He's earned the opportunity, certainly, but man, I mean, I'm so glad that I didn't hear that stat from Doris Burke because I wasn't listening to the sound, but that's a really interesting stat. The lefty layups really stand out to me with him.
Yeah, and I think like just speaking more from a fan perspective, like I do think this first round series would be fun. This is like Atlanta made a really nice comeback in this game. They have some counters that they could do, but these are two very like aesthetically pleasing teams to my eye. Like I think Donovan Mitchell is the best watch in the league, non-Jokic, non-Wembanyama division. Like he had some crazy moves last night. I think Alexander Walker and Johnson are both a lot of fun. Like I think there are going to be a lot of highlights per minute in this potential first round match. So like I'd be very thrilled for 6 or 7 games of this.
Donovan Mitchell had a buzzer beater in the first quarter, in the second quarter, and kind of in the third quarter. It wasn't quite a buzzer beater, but it was in like the last 5 or 6 seconds. Just incredible shot making from him in this game. Let's move on to the other game that we want to talk about. Not so much the game, but really the player here. Cade Cunningham making his return in the Pistons win over the Bucks. An easy win for Detroit. None of the starters had to play heavy minutes, right, as expected, but unexpected was the Cade return here. I mean, we kind of started to get the inkling ahead of the game that, Cade's kind of thinking about coming back about a day before the game. And then he was upgraded from out to doubtful or questionable. And then kind of, Cade's playing. It looks like he's going to play. And then he's out there with the starting lineup. Mike, he looked great. He looked awesome in this one. Really just getting to the rim a lot, I thought, playing with burst, playing with speed. And I know that it's not the same as like a rib injury, right? Where you're dealing with the collapsed lung that he was dealing with, which, by the way, everybody sort of expected him to miss the rest of the regular season with that. So for him to come back with a couple of games left, he's still not going to make All NBA. He's going to miss it by 1 game here, but if he plays the rest of the way, but for him to come back from that injury and then show it, you know what I mean? Like, again, not a rib injury, so it's not the same, but it's still like that sensitive part of your body, and just time after time driving against Milwaukee's quote unquote defense. But like putting the arm up, showing the area, all that stuff. I thought it was as good as a return that you could hope for if you're a Pistons fan. I mean, a lot of confidence right now in Detroit.
Yeah, and I think like, it to your point, like he looked just the same as he always has. And I think if you just look at the box score and you see he scored 13 points, it wouldn't seem that impressive to you. But like he had a nice dunk, he had a nice block on the perimeter, like the sort of extra effort plays he looked like had no problem kind of going and doing and forcing the issue and imposing himself upon the game. Like there was no hesitation. I think he looked, like you said, he looked great. And I think that's the best news Detroit could hope for. I will say that I read that he and Doncic are both planning on getting to 64 games and appealing the league to the league's office for exceptional circumstances to qualify for the 65-game rule, which I don't know that's going to go so great, given that Doncic would have qualified if he simply hadn't accrued 16 technical fouls. If he could control his little baby temper, he'd have qualified anyway. And Cunningham's injury, unfortunate and rare as it is in the NBA, like it's just an injury incurred during play. So I'm not holding my breath that either of these guys are going to win, but it is interesting. And clearly, I think if this rule was not in place, Cunningham probably wouldn't have come back, no matter how good he looked, right? Like there'd be no reason for him to risk it.
That's true. And by the way, that is how the NBA might get around the Luka thing, because everybody's like, well, you can't be like anti-baby, anti-family. It's like, well, he also got suspended for 1 game, so they could point to that one and be like,
well, if Luka's the baby in question, I can be anti-Luka as the baby. Control your temper, man. It's that easy.
I do think it would be interesting for the league to come in on this and just try to play good cop a little bit, where they say, look, we instituted the rule because we were trying to block against load management. Cade had real injuries this season. The Luka thing, just putting that over there because it's a little bit different. But like Cade collapsed lung. Like this guy never took a game off that he could play. He actually came back to try to help his team at the end of the season, blah, 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 whatever. We'll go ahead and give him the benefit of the doubt. And maybe you say the same thing with Victor Wembanyama, who dealt with the rib injury here, depending on how things play out for him. I don't know. It'd be interesting to say, like, look, these guys weren't load managed. They had real injuries, but they're deserving of all NBA status, of end of award consideration. Like, we're going to go ahead and like, just let them slide. It would be interesting, but it probably would set a bad precedent. So I don't know where they're going to fall on that. I don't know.
I could see it happening if the league already knows that they are going to eliminate this rule in the near future, which like it's been in the CBA. But if they are going to do something at these board of governors meetings and they decide that they're going to get rid of the rule anyway, maybe this could be a way to ease some of the sting. Because like I think it was Nate Duncan that had the stat that Cade Cunningham has played like the 58th most minutes in the league this year or something. So like, what are we worried about the games played if he's been one of the leaders in total minutes played? But we've already gone over this rule like a billion times. We all know that it sucks. I do think if they are planning on getting rid of it, though, and these guys really are going to appeal, maybe this could just be a way to soften the blow and ease into that a little bit, which, you can argue about the fairness of that to the previous years, but that's the only way I could see it really happening.
It's a great point, right? Because it's kind of an easy way to transition into getting rid of the rule. Where it's like, hey, and you can even say like, look, we did the rule and look how great it worked. We don't need the rule anymore. And it's just like, all right, take your victory lap on your dumb thing, whatever it is. The other thing I liked about this game from Detroit, very first play of the game, everybody either touched the ball or was involved in the possession. And what really has stood out to me with Cade out, obviously, is just how much these other guys have gotten involved. Jalen Duren, Asar Thompson, Duncan Robinson, even with a little bit of playmaking. Obviously, Dennis Jenkins, who was filling in for Cade in that starting lineup. But it just felt like everybody was pulling their weight, right? Like they were doing their part to help Detroit's offense keep moving, and they were fine without Cade. The fact that they didn't just ditch that and revert back to Cade Cunningham ISO basketball, pick and roll basketball. Not to say that they were doing that like all the time anyway, but I like that. To me, drawing up the first play where literally everybody either touched the ball or was involved in the play by setting a screen or something, that to me was very pointed by Bickerstaff in terms of, all right, Cade's back, but this is still an everybody eats offense. Don't worry. Everybody's going to keep getting their touches, because you could look at it like and say, oh, Cade's back, everybody's happy. But at the same time, somebody like Dennis Jenkins or Duncan Robinson or Asar Thompson or Ron Holland, like these guys who have been on the ball a little bit more, could be like, I really enjoyed that. I kind of hope that doesn't go away. I thought that was a good message sent by Bickerstaff to be like, first play of the game, everybody touches, everybody's involved. This is still how we're going to roll. And then you look at the final box score, 4 assists for Asar Thompson, 3 assists for Tobias Harris, 3 assists for Jalen Duren, who's like a playmaker now, has real dribble handoff chemistry with Duncan Robinson, who had 3 assists. Dennis Jenkins, 6 assists off the bench. Karis LeVert, 4 assists. You obviously had Cade with his 10 assists, but like there was a lot of multiple assist stuff in this game.
Yeah, I don't really have any major additions to that. You're right. It's just like, this is a team that proved it was a playoff quality team without Cade. They would have been, if you just extrapolate the record, and there's problems with that, but like they would have at least have been fighting for, a 6 seed spot, just right there up there with Atlanta and Philadelphia, if Cade had not played at all this season. So yeah, those guys deserve to have some touches. They deserve to show what they can do too.
We're going to get into our good take portion of the episode. We're going to start with who's going first this week. I think it's me, you.
Dealer's choice.
It'll be you. On the other side of the break, Mike has his first good take. We'll be right back. All right, back here. This is Good Take. Wes Goldberg, Mike Shearer. Mike, start us off. Your first good take.
Yeah, so I wanted to follow up because I was listening to the episode that you had with Adam Matas a few days ago, talking about Denver and their ceiling. And I wanted to follow up a little bit on that, exploring a little bit more about what's going on with Peyton Watson and why he is, in my opinion, the biggest X factor in the NBA playoffs, period, full stop. The Nuggets right now are on a 10-game win streak. Most of that's been without Watson. They seem likely to, end up as the 3 seed, and then that'll be a playoff gauntlet, most likely, of Minnesota, San Antonio Spurs, Oklahoma City Thunder. The Nuggets can beat any of those teams in one game. They've proven it, right? Can they beat all of them 12 times without their best perimeter defender and, frankly, their best non-Aaron Gordon athlete? I think that's where I get stuck. And Watson's currently labeled as week-to-week with another troublesome hamstring. That is not a phrase that is unfamiliar to Nuggets fans, or really the NBA at large this year, which I feel like we've seen so many hamstrings. But think about this. Their best perimeter defender right now is Christian Brown, right? And he is, I'd say, fine. He tries pretty hard. Watson is better than him on the ball, and he's also a better backline help defender. He's a pretty freaky kind of like jump out of nowhere when ball handlers don't expect it, blocks guy. And he's also been secretly one of the most important offensive players. And I'm not just talking about when Jokic was out, he was scoring, 30 points a night randomly. And people are like, whoa, when did Peyton Watson learn how to dribble? When Jokic and Peyton Watson play together, they have 133.0 offensive rating. That is ludicrous. That is like so far above the best mark in NBA history. It's a joke. He's making 52% of his corner threes. Like, think about how often we've seen in the past teams basically swarm Jokic and Jamal Murray because there just hasn't been enough shooting on Denver. And Denver's always scored anyway, right? Like, offense has never really been their problem. But people say that as if like you don't want to be even better than your already great offense. Like, you know what I mean? The better you are on offense, the more margin that for error that gives you on the other side of the ball. And I just think that like if Watson can't come back and he can't be he can't be who he was previously, they're just gonna run out of firepower on both sides. I'm worried about against those teams in particular. It's just too much to ask for them to be their best version of themselves every single night when they're missing one of their best players.
I think you nailed it right there. Even just with the last part you said, one of their best players. We could talk about whether like how he fits in, the utility of Peyton Watson, his importance, all that stuff is obviously very important. His defense, he is one of their best 5 players this season. He's been awesome for them. And he is clearly their best perimeter defender. And if you look at a playoff series where they'd have to play OKC or the Clippers or Minnesota, you're going to need Peyton Watson because Christian Brown can get beat in those series pretty bad. Like you said, Brown's best asset as a defender is that he tries really hard. But as a dribble containment guy, especially against guys with like a really quick first step, he's not always great. Like he kind of just, he jumps out a little bit too much. He's a little too herky-jerky for me defensively, where Peyton Watson is just stout. He's got those long arms where he can just corral these offensive players. They're going to need him. They're going to need him. And the idea of having him and Aaron Gordon, how many times have we seen them on the court together at all this season? I can't really remember one where they've had both Peyton Watson and Aaron Gordon. If they could get both of those guys on the court, or at least at the very least available, right, in a playoff series, that's going to be hugely important. And then his volatility on offense, and I mean that almost in a good way, it gives them a little bit of what Russell Westbrook gave them in his best moments last year, where it's just this super freak athlete who's able to crash the boards, make stuff happen. Peyton Watson has a lot of I make stuff happen-ish stuff, qualities to his game that in an offense that is so Jokic-centric, where you're playing off of Jokic, you're doing all those things, and obviously that stuff works. You just sometimes wish that there was a little bit more of a chaos agent involved, and Peyton Watson can be that every once in a while. Like, obviously, he could be in the corners and make those threes, but he's also live to just extend a possession with a great cut or a crashing on the boards or whatever it is. I think in a playoff series, that stuff is tremendously important.
Yeah, and I think the chaos agent thing is fun to think about, right? Because when you're saying chaos agent, what you're saying is somebody who can go out there and like do something off script. And usually those kind of guys are the guys who are also quick twitch, freaky athletes. And Watson is really the only guy like that, arguably on Denver's entire roster, right? Like Aaron Gordon is an insane vertical athlete, super strong, like by traditional measures, but he's not the kind of quick twitch guy
different kind of athlete.
Watson is. And when you're going up against the Thunder, who are just filled with perimeter defenders designed to envelop people, like you need somebody who can actually meet them on their athletic playing field and beat them occasionally. And I think that was really shown the last time that OKC and Denver played each other. Was the only time that Watson has been healthy. He scored 29 points. He was their leading scorer by 13. Jokic was second with just 16 points. Watson led them in field goal attempts. Like he's not going to be able to do this every night. And if he has to, like Denver's already drawn dead, right? But like 2 games in a 7-game series against the Thunder, you need Peyton Watson to score 22, 23, 24 points. And he's really the only guy who can do it off the dribble. Jamal Murray can get his just because he's such a sensational shot maker. Jokic can get into the paint because he's so big that he can go out there off ball and then get an entry pass, and then he can attack from there. Watson might be the only guy who can take the ball from the three-point line and get to the rim consistently against a defense as good as Oklahoma City's or as San Antonio's. And I don't want to gloss over that too much either, right? Like they're going to need 2 good perimeter defenders, Brown and Watson, if they have against San Antonio's 3 good ball handling guards. And I just think that I mean, we don't know what Watson's going to look like or Spencer Jones for that matter. And I think that as good as Denver has been these last 10 games in their winning streak, to me, it's like they've been playing close to their peak every time. And you just need more margin for error.
Yeah. I mean, when they won in 2023, they had this deep bench, right, that they can get to. And the reason they haven't really won, mainly is because they didn't have that deep bench over the last couple of years. And Peyton Watson, if he's available, obviously gives them that depth. Spencer Jones is a really good name to bring up too. I want to focus on the X factor part of this too, because the whole point of your take is that this is the biggest X factor in the league. Like we know that Peyton Watson is important. I want to zero in on that because we can talk about other X factors in the West and in the Eastern Conference playoffs, but I don't want to focus on the health part of it. And obviously Peyton Watson week to week, like if he's going to even be available is a big part of it too. This guy also wasn't a big factor in the playoffs previously for Denver. Like he's sort of a playoff unknown. He played 14 games, 14 minutes per game for Denver in the playoffs last year. If he's available and he's right, you expect him to have a much bigger role than that this season after playing almost 30 minutes a game this season when he's been out there. I I do think seeing Peyton Watson in a playoff scenario with a bigger role, that's not something we've ever seen before, right? And so just in that way, he's a massive X factor. And I'm trying to think because, this you brought this up and I'm like, what are the other similar big X factors?
I got one good one for you, but on the Eastern side.
I wonder if we're thinking about the same person because that was the other big X factor I could think of. Who's your guy?
Duncan Robinson for Detroit.
Oh, I had a different Piston.
Ooh, fun. Yeah, Pistons have a lot of X factors because we just don't know what they're going to do. But my thinking was Detroit's got such a shooting paucity, and they really need somebody to be able to do it. We know Duncan Robinson can shoot. I'm not worried about him suddenly shrinking in the playoffs. It's about, can he stay on the floor defensively? Can he survive without fouling himself out with the dumbest fouls? Like, that was the thing that always held him back in Miami, I felt like, was when he gets beat, he just refuses to allow himself to get beat, and he does horrible fouls all the time. It's like, sometimes, man, you just got to take one for the team and hope your backline defenders, hope Jalen Duren can go out there and clean up your mistakes. Stop putting yourself in these bad situations because the team needs you on offense.
Yeah, he's really bad on those late contests where he just gets his hand in the cookie jar, and you're like, dude, just stand there. It's okay.
And he's been better this year, and they need him. They need him to be able to play 26, 27, 28 minutes a night.
And I really do enjoy some of the ball handling stuff that he can do. He's not like the super high level passer, but he's taller than you think. He could see over a defense. He could drop a pass, to a guy on the dunker spot. There's some stuff there that they explored a little bit more with Cade out that they'll get to more, and that dribble handoff game between him and Jalen Duren just continues to get better and better in Duncan's first year in Detroit. Obviously, Duncan established a lot of that with Bam in Miami. I had Asar Thompson, though, as my biggest X factor for the Eastern Conference because we know what he can do defensively, but we've also seen perimeter defenders like Asar Thompson just be X factors in playoff scenarios, right? Where, okay, well, now it's one thing to do this in a random game in March in an 82-game season, but now if you're Jason Tatum, if you're Jaylen Brown, if you're Donovan Mitchell, if you're name like the premier offensive threat on the other team, it's not just seeing Asar Thompson for one random night in the middle of a regular season. Now you're seeing him every other night for potentially a 7-game series. And the way that those kinds of defenders have, whether it's, I think about, Andre Iguodala, in his prime, or Paul George guarding, Paul George and Jimmy Butler guarding LeBron in his days in Miami, or guys like that, Kawhi Leonard in his various playoff seasons. The way that those guys tend to get stronger over the course of a series and not back down has been an X factor historically in the playoffs. And I think Asar Thompson could really just F somebody up, basically, in a potential playoff series and just really ruin a guy's series. Not only that, but also, can he flash a little bit more offensively? Can he be a factor in a way where that he won't quite be the Jalen Williams to Cade Cunningham's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, but can he start to at least shine a light on the fact that he might be able to become more of an offensive threat in the future? I just want to see a little bit of growth from Asar Thompson in the playoffs, which is obviously the ultimate stress test, but every once in a while, those are the kinds of tests that bring the best out of these kinds of players.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because I've been working on an article all season long that I've decided eventually I need to wait to see how the playoffs play out before I can publish it. But it's essentially has the NBA figured out how to weaponize non-shooters? And so over the last 10 years, there's been this like very obvious decline in the viability of guys who aren't at least willing three-point shooters. Accuracy sometimes is not even part of it, right? Like they're related, obviously, but like you have to be willing to shoot three-pointers in a lot of cases to have any value on offense. And I've been working on this thing that basically said like, hey, every year in the last 10 years, the analytics say that if you aren't a willing or accurate three-point shooter, you have been less and less impactful in your role. You have been less useful to a team over time. And that more or less makes sense, I think, based on how we know the league has gone. But where it's interesting is like this year in particular, there are a lot of really standout, not quite superstars who are not very good shooters, but will be very important to their team's playoff chances. And I'm like, the analytics have said a lot of these guys have become very good, very impactful players, despite their lack of a three-point shot. And I want to see how it'll play out through the playoffs. We have Asar Thompson and Amen Thompson are probably the two most obvious ones, right? Like those are the peak of what you could possibly be with this like non-superstar, non-center, non-shooter position. But then we also have like Steph Castle in San Antonio, I think is going to be super interesting. Dylan Harper to a lesser extent. Dyson Daniels in Atlanta. Jonathan Kuminga in Atlanta, I think is going to get a chance to really shine. Like there's just a lot of guys who are playing really important roles on teams with real playoff aspirations who like over the last 10 years, the stats would say these guys should be becoming less and less valuable, but teams have started to figure out ways to make them a little bit more impactful despite their lack of a shot, sometimes because of their lack of a shot. And that's something that I've been working on for all year. I'm really excited to publish, but these blasts will go a long way towards changing that thesis one way or the other.
The Dyson Daniels one is a big one too. Going back to Atlanta, like once they trade Trae Young, because Dyson Daniels and Trae Young's minutes always had to be stapled together because Trae Young is such a bad defender that you needed Dyson Daniels out there when he was out there. But it also limited what Dyson Daniels could do offensively because Trae Young always needed the ball in his hands, and then everybody's playing off of Dyson Daniels and crowding the paint. And so they made the decision, obviously, to trade Trae Young, and now all of a sudden you're seeing Dyson Daniels bring the ball up. And once he's got the ball, now you can't just ignore him. And this is what Golden State discovered with Draymond Green way back in the day, is if we just have Draymond handling the ball, you can't play off of him. And he's a great screen setter. He's a really good passer. His chemistry with Steph Curry speaks for itself, all these things. With Daniels, he's obviously not that as a passer, but he's a little creative with the ball in his hands. He's willing to do stuff, which is so much of the battle. Like, even if you're not good at it, you got to be willing to try it. You got to be willing to do stuff, because even that will garner a little bit of respect from the defense, as long as they know that you're not going to just bring the ball up and stand there, 3 feet beyond the three-point line and just wait for stuff to happen for you. And Daniels is, at the very least, willing to try to attack the basket. Sometimes he loses the ball off the shoe or gets the ball stolen from him, but he's willing to try it, and that's important. And sometimes it looks really good, and sometimes he's got like an interesting little float game that he can get to every once in a while. Anyway, that's enough about Dyson Daniels. That tends to be the way that these teams do it, and that's what kind of brings me back to Ausar Thompson. Is with Cade out, they would do this with Ausar. They do this with Ron Holland a little bit too, where they'd let him bring the ball up. I think in that first play that I signaled out when we were talking about the game, it was Ausar Thompson who brought the ball up. That's the way to kind of get it going. And if that means that Cade has to work off the ball a little bit, I think that's okay. Ultimately, Cade ended up with the ball, but just getting him involved in the offense as a ball handler is a really good way. And then as a screen setter, he's really dangerous because he's such an athlete. As a roller, he's really interesting. And then for his twin, Amen Thompson in Houston, they really utilize him in the dunker spot in a really interesting way because he's just such a freak athlete. And so that's probably another way that they can do it too. And maybe, Detroit can experiment with that a little bit more with Ausar Thompson, but that's sort of the Jalen Duren zone also.
I've got a lot of thoughts on this, but let's save it for in a couple of weeks when I get my piece published. Right. I think we can dig into this for a long time. It's fascinating tactically.
It really is. All right, Peyton Watson, biggest X factor in the playoffs. Great, good take, Mike. We'll get to my good take after this. All right, going off the basketball court here, we're going to talk about some narrative stuff. And right now, the biggest story this week, Mike, has been the Giannis toxicity in Milwaukee. Shams publishing that big story on ESPN about the breakdown in the relationship between Giannis and the Milwaukee Bucks. You've got Sam Amick writing a piece about something very similar for The Athletic and what comes next. And in that piece by Amick at The Athletic earlier this week, there was one quote that stood out to me that really had me thinking and honestly kind of pissed me off. And it was this anonymous executive telling Amick the Bucks should have traded Giannis, and I'm paraphrasing here, I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but basically the Bucks should have traded Giannis before the trade deadline. They overplayed their hand, and now they've lost their leverage. And that pissed me off because that was literally the opposite of what everybody was saying before the trade deadline. Everybody, all of you were saying it. Why would you trade Giannis? The offers will be better in the summer. And now you're going to turn around and be like, nah, they really should have traded him at the deadline. You were not saying this, anonymous executive. You were not saying this prior to the trade deadline. Everybody was telling Milwaukee to wait, and now you're Monday morning quarterbacking it and being like, should have traded. Now, granted, maybe you didn't see this additional injury coming. Maybe you didn't see this breakdown between Giannis and the Milwaukee Bucks organization happening, even though you were taking trade calls on your superstar. You didn't think that was going to go awesome. Like, you were obviously, this relationship was obviously only going to deteriorate further. But it also got me thinking, other than once I got over my initial anger on it, that might somewhat be related to the fact that Miami, I guess, had the best offer that they were considering on February 4th. And then on February 5th, they were like, maybe we'll get better offers in the summer. And then they were wrong. It also got me thinking about the whole idea of waiting for the summer to get better offers. And I don't think that's true anymore. I definitely think that there was a point in NBA history where that definitely was true. You wait until the summer where teams have a little bit more flexibility. Maybe they have more draft picks available because of the 7-year out rule and all that stuff. And your offers will be better in the summer. But every time recently that a team has waited until the summer to trade their superstar, the offers have not been better. The offers have been materially worse. You go back to Kevin Durant. Phoenix started shopping him before the trade deadline. Then they pull him off the table, gets back to Kevin Durant. Then he gets traded in the summer. And the Houston Rockets do the Kevin Durant trade almost because they had to, right? Everything you hear out of Houston was like they weren't really chasing Durant, but the offer was so low, like the price was so low that they just felt like we can't really not do this. So it cost them Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks. That's basically it, right? Like a couple firsts, whatever. And now I'm wondering, now everybody's saying that Milwaukee, because of the way they handled this Giannis situation, that they've lost leverage. And if I'm another team, I totally get it. Why would I, if I could have gotten you at the trade deadline, if I could have gotten this star player at the trade deadline, why am I going to now give you more over the summer where now you've taken away a potential playoff run from me? This guy is going to be a little bit older. He's another year into his contract. In what world is this player more valuable than what he was a year ago or half a year ago when I could have gotten him for the rest of the season and for a potential playoff run? And if you're a team that's potentially trading for Giannis at 31 years old with his injury history, every single chance at the playoffs matters for this guy. Ditto for Kevin Durant. It's like, I have him now for one less playoff run. He's going to be a year older the next time that we're in the playoffs than he was when I was trying to trade for him initially. You are not getting the same offer anymore. You are going to get less stuff from us now. And I do think that the way that these trades happen now, I think the trade deadline is the time for superstars to get traded, not in the summer. And if you're a team with a superstar looking to trade your superstar for whatever reason, you're better off doing it at the deadline because now the offers are going to be worse in the summer. So my take, Mike, everybody that says wait until the summer because the offers will be better, you are wrong. The offers will be better at the trade deadline. Do the trade now.
Well, I love the certainty you have, first of all. I find that just your tone is very convincing to me.
That's
as
the
much
idea.
As anything else. Yeah, I think there's a little bit of a disconnect here just because of like how buyers and sellers are viewing risk. It's like the team with the disgruntled superstar, Milwaukee in this case, obviously, is like, it's so hard for these guys to just commit mid-season to totally changing tack and tearing everything down when they're still hoping against hope they can make a little bit of a playoff run, right? Like Milwaukee's season was fairly hopeless by the trade deadline, but it wasn't quite in the shambles it is now. You know what I mean? And like, right. I think especially for Milwaukee, especially for some of these smaller market teams or teams that have been with the same partner, with the same player for a decade, like it's just so hard to rip the Band-Aid off. And I think to some degree, it's like the offseason just finally allows them like the time to mentally readjust and pivot towards a future without said superstar. And then I think on the other side, it's like for the buyers, I do think the buyers sometimes should be even more aggressive. But at the same time, it's so much easier to orient your team around a superstar when you have the offseason to do everything else around the margins. Because it's just like, especially stars like Giannis, who have very specific skills and weaknesses. Like you can't plop him into any given team and maximize that team necessarily. Not to say he's going to hurt any team, but like if you want to maximize it, like there are other moves that will almost certainly need to be made. It's just so hard to do that mid-season. So I think and like the third thing is just the certainty is clearer in the offseason for everything. Draft picks, right? Positioning. Like you said, obviously you can get more draft picks in the future, but it's more about like if you're going to get a draft pick in this coming draft, a lot of people don't like to play the lottery odds in the midseason about like, oh, well, where are the Wizards pick really going to fall? You know what I'm saying? It's so much easier when the Wizards will have the third pick or whatever it is. And I just think like too many executives got to where they are by being kind of risk averse and not all of them, certainly. Like we can point to some more aggressive examples, but most of them typically are fairly risk averse and don't want to be like taking these wild swings in the middle of the season. I think it's just hard to get their heads around it. I don't even think that your thing is wrong. Like, I don't even think that your take is wrong by any means. It's just that the human side of it, I think, is hard for everybody involved here.
That's why I think when you hear the term, well, we're just going to wait until the summer when the offers are better, they might not even believe it anymore, but it is a way to kick the can down the road.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. And kind of save face with your fan base and just honestly, just kind of just be in denial as a front office, right? Like if you were the Bucks and you say, the writing was on the wall. Everybody knew this was it for Giannis. And by the way, he's still employed by the Milwaukee Bucks, and everybody knows he's going to get traded this summer. It was very similar with Durant last year, but it's almost, if you're the front office, it's like, this is such a dramatic decision. It is such an upheaval of everything that we've been for a decade now. I really just don't feel like doing that in February. And if we're going to do it, I want to be forced into a corner to do it. Like if we're going to do it, it's going to be October, extension's not signed. games are not happening. We really have a time to just lock ourselves in an office and ruminate over this for a week and take phone calls and put all the offers on a whiteboard and really think this through. The unfortunate part for the Milwaukee Bucks, just as it was for the Phoenix Suns, is those deals that are on the whiteboard are just not going to be as good anymore. And so if you're going to say we're going to wait until the summer, just say we're going to wait until the summer. But don't hide behind this idea that the offers will be better in the offseason, because they're not anymore. And I do think whether it's Giannis or Durant, you look about Luka, who wasn't shopped in the traditional sense, but
he's a special exception. I don't even know if we can include him in any sort of trade analysis, right?
But I do think that we're seeing the trade deadline is the time for, it used to be like these small tweaks. Let's go get this role player that we think could help us off the bench in the playoffs or whatever. Now the trade deadline has become the time of the superstar to get moved, right? Because these superstars have decided halfway through a year, I'm done here. And once they've made that decision, you might as well just move them. Because like I said, like those are when the offers tend to be better at this point. And so the trade deadline has now become like the time of the superstar, where the offseason has sort of trended away from 2010 LeBron's decision, Gordon Hayward,
free agency,
Kevin Durant. Yeah, now free agency is very much the time of the role player. Let's go get a Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Let's go grab this guy who we think could augment the roster in a meaningful way. It's sort of flipped here recently.
Yeah, and I think the other interesting thing about that too, we're getting off on a tangent here, but I can't remember who wrote this now, I'm blanking, but somebody had the big article about tanking on ESPN recently, and one of the points that came up.
Oh, Slater.
Thank you. Yeah, Slater. And I hadn't really thought through this, but their point was that since free agency is no longer a viable means to acquire a superstar, it puts even more pressure on teams to start the tank, right? Like, because if the only way you can get a star is by trading or by drafting, well, not everybody has the assets to trade for a guy. Not every superstar wants to play in every city. So tanking is really the only viable way to go out and get somebody of that quality. Which, to your point, maybe that's like another reason to make the trade earlier in the middle of the season, right? Start the tank earlier for your own team if you have your own pick, which I think that is part of it. Is a lot of these teams with superstars don't have their own pick, right? So there's not as much incentive to
right.
But if you do, or if you can get it back, that's another reason to do it early.
And it's better for the league if these superstars are traded mid-season, right? Because now you've got Giannis getting shut down. You have one of your top stars not playing for 2 months out of the year. If he got traded to a contender, he's out there, right? Like he's out there, he's playing. Maybe not now, maybe the injury still happens, whatever. But he's in there for the playoffs potentially, right? Like if you're trading for Giannis, you're trading for Durant, you're ostensibly a team that thinks that you can be competitive, as opposed to Milwaukee, who's actively trying to shut this guy down so that they could play for their draft pick anyway. And you might as well at that point have just traded him, and for the league, you know, it would have been better off too. All right, so that's my take. You should have traded Giannis to the Miami Heat before the trade deadline. Is really what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, we got there. We got to the real point of it. Yeah.
Our and one is next. It's time for our and one here on Good Take. This is how it works. We post the takes on our communities page on the RealGM YouTube channel. You go and vote on who had the best take between me and Mike. And then the winner of that has the and one for the following week. And Mike, you are undefeated in this. You are clearly just better at this show than I am. Your take last week that Mitch Johnson should win Coach of the Year. Somehow, I guess no Celtics fans listen to this show. Somehow got 87% of the vote. My incredibly obvious take that the Knicks need to trade Karl-Anthony Towns got 13% of the vote. I don't know if you are recruiting your friends and family to vote on these polls or what you're doing. I don't know if there's some shenanigans afoot, but you're pitching a shutout. I actually got the and one last week on a technicality, but
the technicality being you were right.
The technicality being that I was right and you were wrong, even though the fans liked your take more than mine. But here you are. Yeah. You get the and one again. I'm not stepping in on any kind of technicalities. I'm not calling my own fouls here. You're up.
Yeah, well, thank you, first of all, to everybody. It makes me feel good. I feel validated. I feel seen. And mostly nice. I feel heard. So
I have no idea what that feels like.
Now you'll get a little bit more of my voice. But I had, this one was less of a take and more of just like something I've been thinking about that I wanted to throw to US and like to everybody else. So leave your comments on this because this is an open-ended question I'm trying to sort through as I start to think about like all NBA and postseason awards and MVP and like guys like Kawhi Leonard and Kevin Durant are kind of in the midst of those conversations right now. And what I'm trying to wrap my head around is like, how much should we penalize or boost guys for sort of off-court behavior and like leaderships and intangibles? And like, this is very tricky because there are some things that are very loud and very clearly negative on a team. And like, I think Kevin Durant, Burnergate, disparaging messages about his teammates today, even though he did not explicitly come out and say, yeah, those were me. I think a lot of people are operating under the assumption that, he was out there talking trash about his teammates, basically, which is a bad look. And the other guy here, Kawhi, obviously, is at the center of the biggest scandal the NBA has seen since, Tim Donaghy, maybe, around like being paid under the table and stuff like this. And even though it has not impacted him on the court, where he's been fantastic, the whole Clippers organization has had to operate under the assumption that some sort of punishment is coming in the future. And like, at a minimum, we don't know what it'll be. And I think a lot of people are asking for Adam Silver to bring the hammer down. Some people are expecting that, some aren't. But like, there will be some sort of punishment, and likely draft pick oriented. And, I think that without aspiration, it's very possible that the Clippers, who are red hot at the trade deadline, let's not forget, maybe they don't trade James Harden. Maybe they look to bolster their team in other ways. So like, I think you could look at Kawhi's role and aspiration as sort of changing the direction of the team. But like, so like, these guys are both obviously awesome players. They are worthy all NBA players. But do you dock them any points for sort of knowing that they are doing these other things on the side that are negatively impacting the team? And I'll just leave it there.
So I do, right? And to me, this might not be the best answer to your question. It is a little bit of a case-by-case basis, right? Mm-hmm. Like when I was doing the MVP straw poll, for instance, and I think at the time Luka was still qualified, Cade did not qualify. So the top four were SGA, Wemby, Jokic, Luka in whatever order. Everybody had that top four in some order. That fifth spot was really hard, and it came down to me for Jaylen Brown, Donovan Mitchell, and Kawhi were the names that I kind of came up with. And I really had a hard time with it. And every way I looked at it from a basketball sense, other than the fact that the Clippers are a play-in team, Kawhi was clearly the fifth best player, right? He was clearly that fifth spot. And then I was like, why can't I get there with Kawhi? And you can even look at the minutes played thing with him, but I was like, well, if I've got Wemby up there, I can't really hold, if I'm not holding against him, can I really hold it up against Kawhi? Kawhi has been sensational this year when he's been out there. And I was like, that aspiration thing really effed up the beginning of their season. And there's no way to prove it other than the fact that the Clippers are a pretty talented roster, and they, had James Harden and Ivica Zubac at the beginning of the year too, so they were even more talented then than they are now. And they got out to that horrible start, and I can't help but think, like, the only thing that changed was the aspiration scandal coming out. And clearly the vibe around the team was weird. And they got out to that really bad start, and in that sense, it kind of did feel like Kawhi, as great as he has been, kind of shot them in the foot right at the gate to start the race. And they've never really fully been able to recover from that. Had they just been out to a normal start, we're talking about maybe a team that could be a top 4 or 5 seed in the Western Conference with the way that they've played since they've kind of gotten things figured out. Maybe they don't trade hard. Maybe they don't do all, like, who knows, like, what ends up happening with all of this. I have already said that the Clippers won the trade deadline. That was one of my other good takes. But, I think we're living in a very different kind of maybe Clippers world if all of that stuff doesn't come out when it does. So I held it against Kawhi. I was like, you know what? If I'm going to nitpick here, I'm going to go in another direction because I just don't feel great about putting Kawhi in that fifth spot right now. But a lot of people did have Kawhi in their fifth spot and didn't even think twice about it. They're like, whatever, that happened off the court. There's nothing to do with what happened on the court. Unfortunately, I think it's a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, totally. And at the end of the day, I think a lot of people would kind of like wave their hands and be like, well, it's going to show up in the wins or losses if it's impacting the team one way or the other, right? And I think that's a fair argument. And you don't want to get too much into this stuff either, because I think we don't really know what's going on in the locker room. We don't know what's happening in these guys' group chats with each other. Well, I mean, I guess we have an idea what's happening in Kevin Durant's group chats, but like in general, like it's kind of like coaching, right? Where like the interpersonnel dynamics and coaching are both things that you only see the tip of the iceberg, and so I get nervous drawing too many conclusions, but it's just something that, like, when you think about the entirety of their season, these are going to be some of the first things that you think of. And realistically, in 10 years, in 15 years, when we're looking at players' careers, like, these will still be, especially the Kawhi thing will be one of the first things that people think about with his career, I think, depending on how it's adjudicated. Like, this will always be an asterisk or a footnote. I don't want to say asterisk. That has the wrong connotation, but it will be a major footnote in his career. So it's really been weighing on me as I think about these things.
It might be more than a footnote. It might get like the lead paragraph in the final story about Kawhi's career. On the flip side of it, though, you do have a scenario where, like, the Jaylen Brown thing, right? Where if you're going to vote for Jaylen Brown for MVP, a lot of it is like in terms of the numbers, his numbers are great, but they're not notably better than somebody like Donovan Mitchell or Kawhi Leonard. If you're going to vote Jaylen Brown in that 5th spot or All NBA or whatever you're going to put him, or 4th spot now, I guess, if Luka doesn't qualify, it's also sort of narrative based, right? And that's not wrong. I think that's obviously part of the award, but it's sort of the flip version of that narrative is, well, we had these low expectations for Boston and Jaylen Brown stepped up and he was this leader that nobody expected and all these things. And if you're going to give Jaylen Brown credit for that, you also have to dock that lack of leadership to other players, when I guess it's applicable. And I do think leadership is a really big part, right? Like, you and I look at the stats, we look at the analytics, we watch the film, we watch these basketball games, but you talk to players and coaches, like the leadership stuff matters so much for these guys. It's why I think I ended up going Donovan Mitchell on that 5th spot, because everything you hear out of Cleveland is we are lost without Donovan Mitchell. And it was sort of the other argument where, and Jared Dubin and Mo DeKeel talked about this on their podcast because they talked about who they had there in their 5th spot, and I think they both went Jaylen Brown. And their argument was very much like he lifted the Celtics out of this place where to the top of the Eastern Conference or at least near it. And then for Kawhi and Donovan Mitchell, they both kind of held up the up and down nature of their respective teams and their seasons against them. And I kind of looked at that as, I agreed with them on their take on Kawhi, but I disagreed on their take on Donovan Mitchell. Yes, the Cavaliers season has been up and down, but that to me was not because of Donovan Mitchell. They were still, unlike the Clippers who are in the play-in, the Cavs have been a top 4 team in the East all season long, despite all that up and down. And I give credit to Donovan Mitchell for that. And that's why I ultimately went him 5th.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to me. If you're willing to boost players, and I think most people are, right? Like it's easier just from human nature to give people, a bonus, a pat on the back for doing things well above and beyond the Call of Duty, right? Like that's what you want to do. You want to reward the people who are doing more than they have to do. And I think leadership kind of falls into that category sometimes. So if you're going to do that, you got to punish people if they are not performing those tasks, right? Like if they are only showing up, clocking in 9 to 5 and then leaving and they're dragging down team morale for whatever the reason is, like, I think you're probably right. I think you probably do have to do both sides of that coin.
Do we want to do like all lack of leadership, all scandal team for this year?
I'd have to think about who else would be on that team after those two guys. Those are the ones that spring to my mind.
Kawhi and KD.
I do think there's some juiciness to this topic for sure, but I'd have to brainstorm.
Okay, let's brainstorm it. We'll save it for
next
a later
Thursday.
episode.
Yeah.
This has been Good Take. Tune in every Thursday. Subscribe to Real GM Radio and the Real GM Radio Network on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back next week.